So how many of y'all know how to listen? That is the topic of today. Good morning, good evening, good whatever, wherever you are. I don't know where you are, what time it is, and when you're watching this. My name is Jordan Hayles, and we have Coach T of Her Life, Her Legacy here with us today to talk to us about something that apparently we all do, I think. Coach T, talk to us about this listening thing.
Yes. So thank you for having me today, having this conversation today. And I'm glad you said it was something that hopefully we all do. And it's true, right? So listening is the thing we do the most of next to breathing. Yet less than 5% of the adult population has had any formal listening training, period. No listening education. So it's kind of an interesting place to come from, right? Where it's like, this is the thing we do the most next to breathing, and yet no one's been formally trained how to actually do it. So yeah, I think we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah. So, all right. So question, if it's something that we're doing all the time, wouldn't that imply that we got the practice and we're masterful at it? I mean, why is it that we need formal training at something that is a natural instinct?
So what's natural is often what's habitual. And we often have very habitual thinking, ways of speaking, ways of being, just based off of how we were raised or the environment that we live in or the role models that we've seen. So in one sense, we're listening to our environment, we're listening to our leaders, we're listening to our parents, right? Or our teachers or whomever, and we're adopting ways of being, thinking, speaking, and moving through the world, those as truths, right? So we kind of take this on, and then at no point are we actually kind of looking at what all we're taking on. So even just saying looking, seeing is a form of listening, right? So it's almost like if I can help people really see that listening is not just hearing noise, right? But a total embodiment of the five senses to create an understanding, that's a different ballgame. And that creates a whole new world when people can see life differently.
Like that. Embodiment of the five senses.
It is.
That's
but
big.
Most people think listening is just hearing, right? Like five senses: see, taste, touch, smell, hear. Was that all of them? See, taste, touch, smell, hear. Yeah. But to think that you're actually listening, to fully listen, requires all five of the senses. So like just knowing that enhances your capacity and ability to listen in ways you've probably never thought about.
That's right. And it's interesting when you talk about like that level of listening. And then I think about the amount of distractions that I was about to say that we have, but I'm just going to go ahead and take ownership. The level of distractions that I have, right? Mm-hmm. So typically I've got my phone, right? And the desire to check my phone at some point in time. I've got 5 tasks that I'm thinking about doing in my mind that are like occupying space. And then if my office or my house isn't like pristine or even in just like decent shape, then I've got like visual clutter that also like is occupying space in my mind. So it's like right now hearing you say that, I'm thinking on one end, you've got like total distraction, where you probably you are tuned in, but you're tuned into so many different things that you can't be deeply tuned in to any one thing.
Correct.
On the other side.
Yes. And then my work with people helps them see, oh my gosh, right? When we ditch all of those distractions intentionally, like consciously say, I'm going to turn off my phone. I'm going to literally shut the doors, because I'm the type of person that if I see a basket of laundry, it's like I have to go fold those clothes, right? Like literally shut out anything that's going to do exactly what you said and occupy space in my brain. right? So if I can get rid of anything and everything that's going to command or call my attention, that's what I'm going to do if I'm willing to, if I'm going to enter into a conversation where I'm deeply listening to somebody.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell the people why we're having this conversation. So we're having this conversation because Teresa has been doing an ongoing workshop every 2 weeks called
The
The
listening
Listening
workshop.
Workshop. and, and, you know, we were supposed to do this interview a while back, but then Teresa was like, no, you got to come, you got to experience the listening workshop. And I was like, okay, because I had already been told that I needed to work on my listening skills. So I already knew that I needed to be in the listening workshop. and so I got a chance to experience it, not once, but now 3 times, because it was that impactful, but also because I needed it that much. And so we're talking from a place of experience here, both, you know, you having really focused on helping people to deeply listen. And then me having experienced your work. So talk about the focus. Who are the main people that we need to be listening to in our lives?
So I have a belief, and you know them now, they're called Coach T's truths, right? And I say they're my truths because it's essentially a perspective that I've adopted for me. And I find it very useful that if I can remember these truths, then my life often seems to get better and better. So one of my beliefs, or one of the things I believe to be true, is that at any given point in time, you're either listening to yourself, to somebody else, or God. Like, that's it. So at any given point in time, messages are coming in, and they're either you talking to yourself, like, gotta get the laundry, this person texts me, blah, 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 right? Like this chatter that's going on, or somebody who's literally speaking to you, right? In your case, in my case, you, and then God, if you're spiritual or religious, right? So I'm a Christian. So God is always talking to me through his word, right? The Bible, through the Holy Spirit, right? So it's like at any given point in time, you're listening to somebody, and I'm always asking, who are you listening to and how is it serving you? One of the things my first teacher in listening, Dr. Rick Baumolger, said, the quality of your life is directly related to the quality of your listening. So if you are not experiencing a happy, healthy, wholesome life, there's something going on, not with somebody else's listening, but with your listening. And as a coach, people are often coming to me with different challenges or things that are going on in their life. And the number one thing that I ask them, because it'll ultimately come back to listening, is how have you created that? Because listening, right, is taking 100% responsibility, right? If you've created your, you know, your boss yelling at you, right? How have you created that? Like, and listen, like we ask the question and then we listen for the answers.
You know, it's really interesting because this idea of what we create becomes quickly a very controversial and very like hard to understand, or sometimes you can even understand it, but then you kind of get mad at it. It's all different, you know?
Yeah.
So I really want to talk about that, but I actually want to go further back to something that you said, which is, who are you listening to and how is that serving you? Because I remember viscerally one of the first times I heard you say that. And well, I thought I heard you, but I must have only heard you at like listening level 10% because I still didn't incorporate it into my life. But it's really real. So can you talk a little bit more about the different ways in which we're listening to a specific set of ourselves, others, God, right? And the ways in which it's either serving us or it's not serving us?
Yeah, we have what I call useful listenings, right? And non-useful listenings. And I would argue that any listening that I've ever received from God is 100% of the time useful, right? As a child, we might receive a listening from a parent that we don't think that's useful. It's like, hey, eat your vegetables, not useful if you're like, if you're like my 3-year-old son who's like naughty. He literally says, I cannot like that, and hasn't even tried it. So he's already listening. He's not listening to me. He's listening to himself saying, I cannot like that. Right? Cannot like it. So there's useful listening and non-useful listening, right? And if just to kind of play off of the story of my son, it's like, hey, if this kid never eats a vegetable, right? Or he never learns how to actually fuel his body properly and only wants to eat McDonald's, right? And he's listening like, I like McDonald's tastes good. Like over time, that's a non-useful listening, right? Like a way of kind of feeding yourself, literally feeding yourself. So it's like sometimes listenings that are useful don't feel good, right? There's plenty of scriptures that people hear that don't feel good, right? Like, what do you mean turn the other cheek if somebody smacks you, kind of thing. So to answer your question, there's often two types. It's either useful or it's not useful. And the only way we'll ever know if it's useful is if we're willing to slow down, ditch the distractions, and ask ourselves the truth, right? How is this serving me? Or how could this serve me, right? Eating these vegetables. Like, why would this actually be good for me?
Right. Yeah. Or to the point where well, your little baby Jay is only 3, but like, why is it that I've decided that I cannot like this? I mean, that's so specific. I love it. I am able to like this thing.
You haven't even tried it, but we see that. I know we're joking about a 3-year-old, but many of us kind of develop who we are and what we like and what's true and what's not at very young ages. And then we end up in adulthood gripping onto, I cannot like that.
Cannot like that. Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Go
ahead. No,
never having ever examined, never having ever tried, never having ever been with, tasted, listened to, right? So when we talk about listening, and I know you know this from the workshop, I don't call it listening, right? We graduate from listening to an active process called searing, S-I-E-R, where we sense with all 5 senses, interpret, evaluate, and then respond. And we can do this in a snap, right? Because there's always a space between something coming at us, a message coming in, and us taking it in with all 5 senses, interpreting it, evaluating it, and then responding. More often we react, right? I cannot like that. I'm not going to look at that. I hate that, right? The whole fight, flight, freeze are just like, ugh, right? But rarely, when we talk about listening education and less than 5% of the adult population, rarely are we actually taught to sit in uncomfortable spaces.
Yes.
Right? Rarely are we ever like, it's really gonna feel kind of bad, but go for it. And people are like, I'm not going for that. It's like when somebody's like, oh, this tastes awful, try it. You're like, I'm not trying that, right? Because we're creatures of comfort, right? Like we want comfort. We want it to be easy. It's like, is this going to be on the test, right? Like we're not even trying to, at some point, it's like, are we even really trying to learn? Or are we just trying to do what's going to make this thing go away, right? And even that's not listening. So clearly I could go on and on and on and on and on.
Yes. But I love that you went to the things that don't feel comfortable, right? That we get a chance to sit with and listen to. What was most amazing to me in my journey was how you can also not be listening when you come to something that you really like and that you're really in agreement with, and that you're just so in agreement with that you're not within your body actually sensing, searing, right, as you would say, and being with that. So can you talk about the idea of when we get a chance to listen to these things that do cause pleasure and happiness and joy, and how we can really sit in that?
Yeah, I think it's just the awareness, right? It's like we take 100% responsibility for our listening, but that's also, when you do that, it's because you're conscious and you're aware of what's going on. So what I like to encourage all of my students and all of my clients to do is create your listening before you listen. So if you already know, I'm going to love this, or I love this speaker, or I love this author, and I'm just in total agreement with everything that they're saying, they can't say anything wrong, and I've heard her say it, it's like, you and I have a shared teacher who literally said she watched a movie 300 times. 300 times, because every time she watches it, she gets something new. Every time she watches this movie, we're like 300 times. I was like, this is 2 hours, like 2.5, maybe 2 hours, 40 minutes. I don't even know. Like, but that's a master, right? Who creates her listening before she listens, even if it's something that she's heard before. And I love this because I've often told like my clients, like, hey, we listen once for information, twice for transformation. And the transformation only comes if you integrate what you hear. So it's the difference between somebody who can speak verses or quote scripture, just speak it. And then there's the person who speaks it from this embodied place of having integrated it. And that's how they live their life. It's how they live their life. So when that person speaks, it just, boom, it like hits you from a completely different place, because you know they're not just saying, oh yeah, it's good to eat your vegetables, or it's good to work out. Like you can look at them and tell, yep, they work out. Right? Or yeah, that's coming from a place of embodied wisdom, not just talking.
Yeah. So let's just say that our ability to hear with our ears is gone, right? And we're having an experience that many people have. You know, there are many people who cannot actually hear with their ears, right? What are we now doing? What senses would you focus on as a listener if you could no longer hear through your ears?
The 4 other senses, because that's what happens, right? Take away your vision, and we've all done a blindfolded, like either pin the tail on the donkey or some type of team building exercise, maybe, where you had to be blindfolded, right? And you call upon your other senses, right? So if you take away my ability to hear, I'm still gonna hear you. I'm still gonna hear you, because I can see your face. I can see if you look confused. I can see if you look really excited. I can see if you look scared. And now I'm looking around to see, what should I be scared of if you look terrified? Like, if somebody behind me, I can smell, right? Not to be weird, but like if there is some, like I can smell fear, right? I can smell if somebody's like perspiring. I can smell if somebody's breath, like you, all of your other senses get extremely heightened. You can still touch, right? You can taste a message. So that's what happens. And I was sharing with, on this path to finding my own voice, right? I discovered like, oh, I know why I was put on this earth, to help people to listen. And that was because so much of my childhood experience, I never felt safe enough to speak, to share. So I would just sit back and listen. And by not speaking, you take away my ability to speak, my ability to listen skyrockets, my ability to see skyrockets, my ability to smell, like all of the things just magnifies, because I'm not speaking, tasting, right? Using the mouth, if you will. So,
right. Yeah. No, that's, you know, it's just as you were going through that, I realized it could be the hearing workshop, but no, it's the listening workshop, you know, and I wanted to ask that question to reemphasize this point that listening, as you said, is this 3-dimensional, fully embodied experience. And during the listening workshop, you show a video that I love, and the majority of my listening of that video comes from what I see and what I choose to be present with my eyes, because you've awakened us all to being more present with everything, and that's just, I realized that I was missing a lot. Oh, hold on, let me just be honest. So you get a chance to take a listening quiz before the listening workshop. All right, let's just put it on the table, okay? You can score 100 on the quiz. I scored a 34. Okay, all right. I want to put it out to the people, right? And so one of the things that I realized was that I stopped looking at people while I was talking, or even while they were talking, right? Or that I would laugh, because I laugh a lot, but in the course of laughing, that I would stop listening, and I would stop looking, as a form of listening. So have you noticed in your time of helping people to kind of like get back into their bodies and listen, other things that people do to avoid?
Well, that's it. Like, you nailed it. It's like, people don't want to feel, they don't want to feel, right? And if they feel this sense of like, I'm gonna cry, they have a story about what it means to cry that they listen to, right? If they don't want to cry, or if they don't want to feel angry, or if they don't want to feel sad, or if they don't want to feel frightened, right? And I remember getting into Dr. Rick's class at Rollins. This was years ago. I think it was like 2010, 2011. And we just did this exercise where we sat in silence, probably for 3 minutes. And it was the most excruciating 3 minutes of my life, because it was the first time I had settled. And oftentimes now I coach and talk about the snow globe analogy, right? Like, of our minds literally being like a snow globe that's shaken up, right? It shake, 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 shake. And there's like some type of winter wonderland scene, but you can't see it because it's just moving, moving, moving. And then the second you set it down, and then all the snow, right, starts to settle, then you can see clearly. And at that time, what I didn't want to see clearly was I was a square peg in a round hole in my corporate work. Right? I didn't want to admit that I didn't want to climb the corporate ladder. I didn't want to be where the leaders thought I should be moving on. And that felt really uncomfortable. And that was also the first time I had heard my own voice that was like, right? Because typically your soul will speak to you in a whisper, right? Like, you need to leave, right? Or it'll say something like, or it'll say, you're exhausted, right? Or, do something kind. Like, sometimes the whisper will be like, just buy it, or just give it, or just like, and you might be like, really? But it's for what happens is people really lose a sense of connection with themselves, right? And then to feel again, that can be extremely uncomfortable. So part of the reason why the listening workshop requires you to be on camera, right, with a mic that works, and no, it's not recorded, is because I want people to feel what it feels like to bring their full presence into a space, even if it's just online, right? And we're seeing each other through these Zoom boxes. And that invitation alone creates a feeling in people of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be seen, right? I'm going to be taken in, because so much of our culture is this, right? I could be talking to you and I'm talking to you, but I'm not looking at you, right? I'm not really texting somebody, but like, so much of the culture is that. So much of the culture is, yeah, blah, 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 what do you got? It's like, you're never fully seeing somebody. But what I know is when you fully see, you're fully able to hear, and you're often going to see something and hear something that you would have never had the opportunity to hear had you not brought your full self to a conversation. And that's uncomfortable for the person sometimes, like trying to bring their full self, like, oh, or the person that's being received fully, because so many people aren't. So it's like, oh my gosh, like I can't be driving when I talk to Coach T. No. Right? Because your presence is that important to me. Right? But I can multitask. There's no such thing, because you're only ever doing one thing.
I really want to hone in on that part about being received fully. So it's like, it's not only can you listen to another, but can you exist in a space where you are completely and deeply being listened to? And, like sometimes with my therapist will just look at me and has the kindest look. And I'm like, oh my gosh, don't look at me like that.
Right? But so let's take that a little deeper, right? So that's you talking to yourself.
That's right.
Because that's an internal listening, right? Like, so you're receiving this really kind, lovely look, but you're hearing something that's having you say, don't look at me like that. She hasn't said a word. She's just looking at you, and you've created meaning from a look. She said nothing. And
Right.
So much of our workshop is around how are you reacting, right, to what's in front of you when this person has said nothing.
Yes.
Right? Or you don't even know this person. You just saw an image.
That's right.
Right? You just see an image, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I hate that guy, or I love her. Right? And it's like, you don't even know her, but you're creating this dialogue that you're listening to and making meaning from it. And that's what happens is people come into this workshop and they see, oh my gosh, like I'm creating this. Yes. I've created the meaning here. And if I stop doing that,
what will
be? Yeah. What could I really create with consciousness and full on listening? And what would shift in my life? I can't tell you the number of communications I've received after the workshop with people saying in less than 24 hours, in less than 72 hours, I did something different. Like I fully listened, or I went and I called my mother, or I went and or I took this time for myself. It's just amazing what shifts for people when they bring their full self to the listening table.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I just got so many ideas. We're going to have to talk about so many ideas after you say that. But, it's first, my therapist is a guy. Just wanted to let y'all know my therapist is a guy.
No problem.
So, but I just, when you talk about this creation and like the seeing of a thing, like what I learned, and this was the biggest thing, is that we're often listening to the past.
Yes.
Not listening to the present. So what do I mean by that? So like there was an experience that happened in your life, and somewhere along the line, it's still playing in your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
In your heart and in your body. And you are listening more to that than you are listening to whatever is in front of you,
You got it.
You know what I mean? So talk a little bit more about that, because you're the expert here.
So, and I wouldn't go as far as to say expert. I would just say experienced, right? Like walking the talk here. A lot of those listenings are unconscious, right? So there's what we are conscious of, and then there's this like programming like deep in our subconscious mind. And I'll give you an example of one that was not useful, right, in my marriage, and didn't know that it was going on. And I was raised by some very fierce, strong women, strong Black women. And the narrative was always, don't depend on a man to take care of you. You cannot depend on, just don't even do that. And that story was born from my grandmother, the woman sitting over my shoulder, right? Because she depended on my grandfather to take care of her. And it was just disappointment after disappointment, right? So she learned And there were other factors going on back, and there was a different time period altogether, but she was very clear, like, if you want something, you go create it, you go get it, and don't depend on a man to provide for you. Not because he won't, but that was just the message, right? So my mother receives that message, right? And she goes down this path and then imparts that wisdom to my sister and I. And I didn't become a Christian until much later in life. And you could imagine being somebody who is like hard charging, I got this. I don't, and it's not even like I don't need you because I don't love you. It's like, no, I was just raised to, I don't need somebody to do this for me. And I'll never forget, I came back from a business trip and my husband was so frustrated. And he was like, just let me carry your luggage. And I was like, right. But so we talk about listening, and it's like, I didn't know until later that this tape was playing. Right. So we talk in the workshop about, 95% of our thoughts being repetitive and negative, right? So it's like there's this big cluster of thinking, listenings that are not only repetitive, but they're also negative. And unless we slow down and kind of tune into the non-useful listenings that are playing under the surface, we cannot release them, forgive them, acknowledge them, and send them on their way. Right? So, and when I say send them on their way, it's replace it with a useful listening, right? About my husband being handsome and supportive, right? Like that's literally something that I had to write down to get out of this habitual loop of, I don't need support, I don't need help, blah, 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 right? And that's how the journey begins, right? It's like, where am I going? Don't look at me like that. Well, what's that about? Right? It's like, let's slow down and see, well, maybe I'm making this up. I'm not saying this is you and I don't want you to answer, but the point is, it's like, where am I saying it means you're weak if you cry? Where am I saying you can't depend on a man or whatever? Like, what else are you saying? Because if you don't identify those things, again, the quality of your life is directly related to the quality of your listening. And if the quality of your listening is bad, you're going to have people yelling at you, right, to carry your luggage or yelling at you because you don't understand something, or yelling at you and calling you a racist, right? And I'm just kind of like pulling from a lot that's going on, or yelling at you and saying you're insensitive about the pandemic, or yelling, like, it's like, whoa, like, let's slow down. If things are blowing up, right, or bricks are being thrown at me, or I'm miserable, or someone's yet like, I'm not listening. Somewhere I'm not listening.
Right.
Because somehow I created whatever it is I'm experiencing in front of me. That's a Coach T truth, right? Meaning I want to move and live in a place where I fully 100% take responsibility for everything that happens for me. Not to me, but for me. If something not pleasant is happening, if I can ask myself, how have I created this? That's an ownership stance that gives me more access to my power to create more of what I want versus falling victim to something that's happened, right? And now it's, why does this always happen to me? Like, that's not even where we're going, because if we're really listening, we'll see how we created it.
Yeah. It's really interesting, and we won't be able to get all of it in this interview.
Right.
But I know that there are people out there who are listening, and some who like automatically know what you mean by the creation point. And then there's some that are like, what does she mean by this creation point? And then others are like, yeah, right, I do not create everything. You know what I mean? Like, right. There's very different reactions to that. And I have been and am on the journey of understanding this, but just the point that you make in the workshop, that whatever it is that you hear or whatever it is that you see, it literally, it's going through your body.
Correct.
Right? Your mind, right? In order for your brain to process whatever it is, and your body, if you're feeling discomfort, to create those discomforts. So, you know, so that's a part of the essence, that whatever it is in the exterior, good, bad, ugly, great, fantastic, it's still, some part of it has got to come through you.
Correct.
In order for you to make meaning and understand what is happening. Therefore, in a very like literal sense, we are like, you know, we are literally creating our experience
all day,
just because it is your brain, your body that is processing external information.
You got it.
Information.
Because what was it, like 16 people all watched the same video in that workshop, 16 completely different experiences. Right. People crying, people laughing, like seeing something different, you know. It's like I say, did you see the turtle? And then, what turtle, right? So it's like, so that's what I mean by that. And it's, the workshop is light because it gives people access to seeing like, look, you're doing this, right? You're the only one that's like losing your mind when this person calls your phone, right? Everyone else sees the name on the phone and nobody's freaking out. So it's such an empowering, like listening is probably it's probably the most powerful skill ever. And I often say, like, you know, when people are like, when we do that conversation, and maybe that's not in this group, but oh yeah, what is it costing you? Like, what does it cost to not listen? Because we are all so clear about where we don't want to listen, what we don't want to look at, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to feel. But unfortunately, in order to heal, we get to feel, right? And if we don't want things to come out sideways, then we get to be with those feelings when they come up and actually look at them, reconcile with them, and then move forward. So I don't know if I actually answered your question.
I don't even remember what the question was. You were saying so good. I was like, wow, that's really great. That's really great. But going back, you know, originally the workshop was, you know, titled how to listen when you really don't want to listen.
Oh yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And you know, and that's what got my attention, because I really never really want to listen. And so, you know, and we are living in a time where there are a lot of difficult things to listen to. I don't know if that's true. I feel like every generation has something super dramatic that happens, and there's like, you know, oh my gosh, the world is over, you know. But it, in terms of my experience, I want to say thank you for creating the listening workshop, because it is light. It is light enough to be a really elegant entry point to listening differently, you know, and saying, you know,
it's the foundation, right? So the workshop is really designed for individuals and organizations, right? Because most organizations, whether they're for-profit, nonprofit, whatever, right? At the heart of any challenge that they're having, it's always going to come back to communication. And any effective, useful communication is going to come from a culture where listening is valued, right? And if we don't know how to listen, this is just step one. So anybody can come to the workshop, and it's useful for individuals and organizations, especially if they're looking for an organization that's looking to become more profitable, right? Looking to create an amazing consumer experience that's going to come through listening, right? Looking to actually have stronger executive leadership and team members. Like, this is the foundation for productive individuals and productive organizations, and peaceful, productive, right? Prosperous in every sense of the word. So I say that because everybody leaves the workshop improving some relationship in their life. And that's all this is about. It's about effective communication. It can only begin and end with listening, right? And it's, who are you listening to and how is it serving you? And if you don't know how to listen, you'll know, because things will not be working out very well for you. So that's what that's all I got for today. I don't know if that's
That's beautiful. That's it. If the life didn't improve at least by 1% today, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Well, thank you so much, Coach T.
Thank you.
where can we find you? Where do you live in the online Zoomosphere, face
Ooh.
laga?
I would say for those of you who are listening that are interested in the listening workshop, just send an email to Teresa at herlifeherlegacy.com. And in the subject line, just put listening workshop and I'll send you the information for the next one. So that's THERESA. Again, if you're listening, THERESA at herlifeherlegacy, all one word, .com. If you're interested in email updates, just go to herlifeherlegacy.com and sign up for those. And then if you're on Facebook, I consider myself an old millennial because I'm not on the gram. Is it called the gram? Instagram? I'm on Facebook. Teresa Watts Campbell. Teresa Watts Campbell. So kind of got my maiden name in there. So you can find me and I kind of talk about listening over there as well. So thank you.
Perfect. Yes. And before I let you go, tell us again, what's your mission in the world?
Ooh, to save lives and businesses through the power of listening. It's that simple. Most of the people I work with want to create an extraordinary life through the power of listening. But right now, given everything that's going on in the world, it's about saving lives, saving businesses, saving marriages, saving careers, all through listening.
Thanks, Coach T.
Thank you. I'm going to stop.